Hi, this is Jim Musser with Upstream Ministries, and this is episode 78 on Views from Downstream. And today I want to focus on a topic that might be considered the third rail of parenting, something that, like Social Security being the third rail of politics, youth sports being the third rail of parenting and talking about parenting. And I'll use this as an example how sensitive of a topic this is. I was doing a seminar in a church a couple of years ago and just was pointing out that youth sports take up so much time for parents and kids. And if you multiply those hours by the number of children, so if you have 2 or 3 kids and they're all in extracurricular activities, but particularly youth sports, it just consumes a parent's time where there's very little left, particularly if they work. And I remember this young lady, I saw her crying. And afterwards I talked to her and she just was so distraught because she felt like that sports were such a benefit to her when she was in school, and that she thought I was telling her to deprive her kids of that. And I was saying nothing of the sort. I was just pointing out how domineering this sports schedule can be to parents. And when you're talking about discipleship of kids, which that's what I'm focused on, then where is the time to do that? Because there's so much time is taken up with sports practices and games and matches. And so I just feel like I still need to talk about that in a very direct way, because in my mind, it's out of control. It's just what parents are investing both time-wise and financially is just can be detrimental to the fact that their kids need a whole life experience and need to understand who Jesus is and how to live for him. Now, sure, you can learn how to do that in competition on a sports field or a court, but it seems like in the United States that the pendulum has just swung so far to full participation and just full commitment. And I know I've told the story about my friend who teaches Sunday school, and a family or a parent told him, he said, well, this was in May, we'll see you in August. Because the kids basically were going to be traveling for their sports teams every weekend throughout the summer. And so the question is this a benefit or not? And I know that for many parents, the reason that they want their kids involved in sports is the hope that they can earn a scholarship for college or even turn pro. And I was just doing some research on that, and between 2 and 7% of all kids end up going to college on a scholarship for sports. And most of it, that 2% is a Division 1A school, and then if you go to a lower level, the percentage increases slightly. But it's no more than 7%. And so when you think about that, the odds of your child getting a scholarship through their play in sports is very low. And yet, parents are out there investing thousands of dollars. It's between $1,000 and $2,000 a year per child to be involved in youth sports. And that's probably just the regular local sports. It's not the travel teams, because I know my wife and I have traveled some and been in hotels on weekends where there's whole teams of some travel sport staying at the hotel. And so you think about, they're paying for the privilege of having their kid on this travel team. They're paying the hotel bills, they're paying the meals, they're paying the fuel to travel to these places. So I have a feeling that the cost is a lot higher if your kids are in travel sports. And what we need to realize is this: there's $40 billion a year spent on youth sports. 40 billion. And and this is probably an unpopular thing to say, but there's money to be made. And so whenever money is involved, you have to always be alert to people who are trying to take advantage of perhaps your desire to see your kid really perform well and get a scholarship. Because they're liable to tell you that, oh, your son or daughter has a lot of potential and they should be doing this, but the only way they're going to get any better is to be on my team and be a part of this. And I'd say, well, if it wasn't, you weren't paying much for the privilege of doing that, I'd say it may be fine. But when so much money is involved, then the question is, okay, what's the motivation of the coach and those involved trying to get your son or daughter into these sports? And so I just think it's something to consider. But overall, we just have to realize as believers that we walk a different path than the world. And like so many things, we as the church tend to follow the world rather than the opposite, where the world follows us. And so if sports becomes a big thing, then the Christian parents are out there in force doing it because they see everybody else doing it. And I just think it's a real trap. And also, and I know Jonathan Haidt has talked about this before, the sociologist that wrote The Anxious Generation, that organized sports, adult-led sports, are not nearly as educational for kids in terms of learning leadership and organization skills, because it's all done for them. They just show up. And whereas kids that have to play, like, I used to play as a kid, we'd go organize our own baseball games and basketball games. We would do all of that. And some of us were involved in organized sports, but a lot of us weren't. But that's how we played. And we, according to Jonathan Haidt, that is something that kids need. They need to learn how to do that. And there's also this thing about, particularly I remember reading just a commentary on what was going on with U.S. soccer, particularly on the men's side. They just didn't seem to be able to push through and really be a great team. And a lot of people blame that on the fact that everything about soccer in the United States is organized. That kids aren't just playing soccer to be playing soccer. It's always organized. And so when it's unorganized, they learn things that they'd never learn from an adult trying to teach them. They just learn it. They learn certain moves or shots that they just discover, oh, that works. And actually, adult-guided coaching at a certain age probably hinders their development rather than increases it, because they don't really have the freedom to discover how to play the game, develop skills that can't really be taught. That's the thing. You hear that a lot about professional athletes. They say he or she's got skills that really can't be taught. Well, where did they get those? Well, probably just playing, without adults trying to tell them what to do. And so the reality is that sports have a place. I love sports. I love watching sports. I like to play tennis, even though I haven't played in a while due to some health concerns that are holding me back. But I enjoy sports. I enjoy watching sports. But sports aren't the end all of everything. It's just a part of life that can be enjoyed. But too often we force our kids into things that really aren't necessary, but it's kind of what we think needs to happen, perhaps for a scholarship or because they're going to be left out because all their other kids are doing it. But I think we have to just navigate our own path with that, with our eyes on fully how do we help our kids become disciples of Jesus? And will sports add to that, or will it detract from that, or is it just neutral? But we have to really ask some hard questions in that. And I think one of the things, particularly with the time factor in travel sports, if you're traveling every weekend and you're practicing almost every day between the weekends, then what time is left to have any kind of real discipleship going on in your home, teaching your kids how to serve, teaching your kids how to follow Jesus? Because the sports is going to just push everything out. And I think we just need to think through that before we just decide, okay, every kid that my son or daughter knows is in sports, so we need to put them in sports. You have to decide what's best for your own children, and particularly in light of what it means to follow Jesus. And so I just want to challenge you parents out there to really think through your kids' involvement in sports. It doesn't mean that they can't be involved in sports, and please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that. But I am saying to question the kind of investment that involvement in sports today in America requires. And is that overall, for the long haul, really, is it worth it or not? And only you can make that decision. I can't make that for you. But I just don't see anybody questioning that. I see a lot of parents just worn out, and they're just running to and fro, taking their kids, chauffeuring them from one practice to another. I know that there are parents who basically use kids' sports to basically survive a poor marriage. They don't really get along with their spouse, so this keeps them occupied, and they don't really need to focus on their marriages because they've got this to do over there. But then, of course, when the sports end, the kids graduate from high school, then you got a problem because now you got to fix a marriage that's been neglected for years. So there's a lot of things to consider with having your kids involved in youth sports, and all I'm asking you to do is just to try to think objectively what is best for your child, what is best for your family when it comes to your kids being involved in sports. All right, I'll leave it there. We'll see you next week. Perhaps we'll have a less controversial topic. I'm not sure. But anyway, we'll see you next week.